Welcome to Happeo Unmuted, the podcast where we speak openly about what it really takes to connect people at work. From internal comms and knowledge sharing to the messiness of change and the rise of AI, we go beyond best practices to unpack what's working, what's not, and what's worth rethinking. Our host, Bourgeault-Trickey, has spent over 10 years in internal comms, building and launching intranets for organizations in telecoms and finance. He now leads client services at Happeo, where he's helped over 120 businesses across the globe create and grow engaging digital workplaces that drive organizational goals and objectives. If you care about how people in your organization share, learn, and adapt, this is your show. And if you're looking for a modern digital HQ, you can find us at happeo.com.
Welcome to Unmuted, the podcast where we explore the messy, brilliant, and occasionally unfiltered world of internal comms, knowledge sharing, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Bourgeault-Trickey from Happeo. Today's guest is Penny Crane, Manager of Internal Communications at Earnest. Penny's built a reputation for cutting through noise and building communication strategies that drive alignment, clarity, and trust. From writing newsletters to leading all hands to crafting leadership messaging, she makes internal comms feel like a superpower, not an afterthought. We're lucky to have her on today. Thanks for joining, Penny.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So maybe we'll jump into our warm-up question. So if internal comms had a blooper reel, what would be on yours?
So I could pull from countless technical issues here, but I'll go with one I recently did. So Zoom has a built-in Q&A feature that we use during our company's all-hands meeting. You can choose to be anonymous or you can type your name in. But my rule and our company rule is that we won't read names regardless. Okay. Somehow, still, despite running this segment multiple times bi-weekly for months, I spaced and I read my boss's name with her submitted question of all the people. And fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, it was a playful jab at our CEO. So
great. Yeah.
I think my face immediately went red, but it was a good lesson for me on what not to do.
I'm kind of curious, how did your CEO react?
He did not blanch at all. This is just par for the course.
Yeah, that's good. I think there's something there too. Like if you're able to have those kinds of moments internally, it's sort of like a culture building moment a little bit as well. So I wouldn't take it too personally. Seems like you bounce back anyway. But yeah, these things happen. I've seen sort of things like that happen myself too. It's just one of the challenges of having these kinds of big giant calls, right? So
yeah, definitely.
So what's we'll do a follow-up one. So what's one moment that made you fall in love with the work you do or totally question your life choices?
That is a great question. I'm going to go with what made me fall in love with my work because that is very true. I love my job. The one that stands out is probably the speech I wrote with our CEO to deliver at a company offsite that we had in Las Vegas. This was just last year. Mm-hmm. I knew I wanted to incorporate the iconic themes and visuals of Las Vegas. I mean, it's so visually dynamic. But I'm also not too familiar with, casino games. So I had to Google the terms. We use our resources that we have. I looked up things like card games and terms that you use like ace or high stakes. And I then used those terms to title each section of the speech outline in a sort of punny way. And then I aligned the content that I knew we wanted to cover to those terms. For example, House Advantage referred to our accomplishments over the prior year, while doubling down referred to areas we wanted to lean in more as a business.
Nice. Yeah. Clever. Do you typically do that kind of thing when you're doing your internal comms, like have the punny titles and stuff like that?
I am all about it. Anytime I can have fun, I'm definitely going to take that opportunity. And in this case, it was a smash hit. And I was empowered knowing that I could make those bets, pun intended, and have as much fun as I did, especially with such a highly visible project such as that one. And I want to say communications, especially corporate communications, it's easy to become formal and even bland. People are afraid to have fun. Yeah. But we actively fight that stigma at Earnest. So it aligns really closely with my values. So we have that in common.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I had a leader when they took over the internal comms function at the organization. They really like leaned into that because it was pretty stuffy beforehand. So we always had these like internal monologues of like italics and bold content that sort of just sat inside the rest of the communications to sort of just break it up. And it's one of those things like the employees only have so much time to go through this stuff. You may as well make it enjoyable while they go through it, right? So
Yeah, totally agree. I will add though, as an aside, on the theme of having fun, if you don't have a wins folder, this is something that myself and a lot of my colleagues have. It's where you can keep recognition or stories, such as this one that I shared. I strongly recommend it. So, screenshotting shout outs, compliments, the funny things that kind of like break up your day. And then you can look back at them later when you need a little boost.
yeah, right. Yeah, there are tough days, right? So I'm wondering, like, as far as the organization's concerned, do you have any kind of like a recognition platform, or do you use any tools for that kind of thing as well?
Yes. So we do use Bucket List
Mhm.
for one-to-one shout outs. And then we have something called monthly celebrations. So we'll honor and spotlight employees through that in a live forum. And then
Mhm.
the last place is our intranet, which is called Happeo. We use that to store different accolades.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard of it, so it's all
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Good plan.
It's
So,
okay.
nice. Yeah, that's good. So you have kind of like a multi-tiered way of doing it. So it's sort of really easy. It sounds like it's definitely sort of like a part of the culture over at Earnest to just do that kind of recognition. That if you have that sort of infrastructure.
Yeah, you can never have too much recognition.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. All right, let's move on maybe to the work behind the work. When people think about your role, what's the biggest thing that they misunderstand?
So I definitely have read a lot of different thoughts and stereotypes about this on LinkedIn, as I'm sure anyone else in internal comms has. But I'm going to go with that good internal comms isn't just messaging. And this was a misconception I myself had, but it's more like conducting an orchestra in a way. So I think of myself as a conductor. I'm creating clarity, connection, confidence, all the various different parts. And when they're done well, it can inspire people around a shared purpose. It delivers the right information at the right time with the right context. And this all helps teams stay aligned and engaged to do the work that they need to do. But I do want to emphasize that as internal communicators, we can also bring a deep understanding of how messages will land. So, this is like our secret superpower
Right.
by anticipating questions and concerns. So then employees don't have to guess what's expected of them.
Mhm.
Because when those goals and priorities are clear, people can move faster and make better decisions. And without that clarity, even the best strategies stall.
Right. Yeah, it's like being able to put your feet in their shoes, the empathy, understanding the audience. You just build that up too over time, right? Like the more you work with these groups, the more you kind of anticipate what it is that they're going to need. I really like that idea of the conductor. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit in one of the upcoming questions. But just that idea of like being able to sort of wield these different parts of the organization or to understand sort of where you fit within that it is something that takes a while to get used to. Did you kind of was it sort of a quick lesson to learn, or did that sort of take time to kind of get to that position?
It took time for sure. I've been at this company for 6 years, so I've been able to pull on that tenure and the history and the relationship building, but it definitely isn't something that I did overnight or
Right.
even just in a short span because relationship building does take a lot of time to
Mhm.
nurture and grow and then new people join the company all the time. So it's just another face and person to get to know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's you gotta have that kind of perspective, right? Yeah. Speaking of these kind of challenges, what's one of the hardest things about internal communications that no one talks about from your perspective?
That is a great question because a lot of people are talking about it. So what are they not talking about? I would probably say that you are often an emotional translator.
Mm,
So you don't really think of emotion and business together in the same sentence. But when you hear the strategy, there's some occasional stress and disagreements, and this can happen at any level, but typically at the top. And then you have the context and relationships I was talking about, and that's with the peers from all around the company. And so you get a pretty good sense or a good read on how any one thing might be interpreted through various lenses.
Mhm.
And then your job is to distill all of that into something clear and actionable when the time is right. So, not too soon and not too late. That is cognitive load for sure, and it's real. And you're absorbing a lot, but then other people don't have to.
Yeah, you're sort of you've seen a lot of things as an internal communicator typically, and being able to kind of work behind the scenes with all the different project teams and all that kind of stuff. There is a lot of sort of a potential for drama and emotion that kind of goes with that. I guess on the other side too, though, there's the idea of being able to really tap into that emotion side with your audience too, right? Of trying to like build excitement, see what's in it for them, that sort of thing. Is that sort of part of your typical frameworks? Like, do you ever think about that as part of the way that you build out your plans and things like that?
Yeah, I'm always thinking about like how can I make this positive and enjoyable without fake and over positivity. You definitely want to stay genuine, but it's early in my process of like, okay, how can we deliver this message in a way that resonates, or how are people going to feel, and what steps do we need to take to ensure that they feel good?
Yeah, that's great. I think we have a kind of a follow up is what's a small internal change you've made that had a surprisingly big impact?
Thank you for that question because I'm pretty proud of this. This year, I added categories to our all hands agenda. So, that biweekly meeting I mentioned,
Yep.
we now have 4 categories, which are our people, our priorities, our products and customers, and our performance. So, prior to that, we just filled the content with whatever was going on around the company, very unstructured. And now I share that agenda and who's presenting before the call as well. So, those 2 things, and it sounds so simple, but we have seen 3 pretty immediate positive impacts. So, first, meetings are more coherent and they feel more like a continuous conversation, picking up from the last meeting rather than a new meeting every time. Second, sourcing content became way easier and more efficient when leads knew what was expected and what to consider putting forward. So rather than me hunting down the information, the agendas are filling up well in advance because leads already know what they should be watching out for. And the third one is that our employees, which we call Ernies, know I know, cute. We know why they know why they're showing up and what they'd consistently get out of every meeting, leading to higher attendance. So I do track this attendance, and all hands is arguably one of our most important meetings. So being able to make such a significant impact to get more people there while offering greater value, I'm pretty proud.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And just to be able to kind of package that up too, because I imagine you can kind of take this same sort of principled, structured cadence approach to other aspects of the communication strategy, and then be able to kind of like, present this and say, look what this did, right?
Mhm.
Are you kind of thinking about that already? Like sort of what this looks like in other areas of the work you do or in other parts of the business?
I am always thinking about areas that I can improve. And I will say I like to think I'm pretty black and white, which might not be how other internal comms people work, but I love structure. I love templates. I love repeatable processes. So wherever I can take something that works in one area and apply it to another, see if it works there as well, I'm going to try.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny, like I've had several other guests sort of bring this up as well. And the more that I talk with people and the more that we kind of have these conversations, the more I'm starting to see this like persona emerge of all the internal comms people. So it's just kind of a fun thing. Like I could see us having a conversation just about structures and sort of like systems that have been developed and sort of what bouncing ideas off of each other just in that regard. Is there anything that you can think of like as a recent one that you maybe set up or that you've sort of been thinking about or working on?
Well, I do write a monthly newsletter. It is called the Bulletin. This is our internal newsletter.
Yep.
And I've gotten it to a point where it's really plug and play, which to me is the ideal
Yeah.
situation. It's far more efficient, only takes me a few hours once a month to pull all this together and get it in the format that's consistent and that people have come to expect. And so that's another example of where I will try to adopt a flow or a ritual that's as streamlined as possible. And it's both for my sake and it's for our employees.
Yeah. There's definitely something to be said about just establishing these kind of like things you can depend on, the cadence, right? Especially if it's working well and you have that measurement as well going into that. That's just a win-win, right? So
Yeah, consistency is a word that I use often that is super important to me. I like to think of myself as someone who's consistent. I appreciate when the people I work with also show a care for being consistent. And I don't really hear people talk about it that much, but it is important to me.
absolutely. Yep. Nice. So thinking about this is maybe another angle to it is like, how do you define successful communication in a world of noise and chaos and the 800 Slack channels and all that kind of stuff going on?
Yeah, emphasis on 800 Slack channels because there's a lot. Any company who has Slack probably has this problem. I'm still trying to find the answer to this one myself, actually, and it's not in the dictionary. So sorry. But my take, I would say, if someone sees my message, remembers it, and then takes action because of it, that's a win. Sometimes, you work for weeks or maybe even months just to drive one key behavior.
Mhm.
And at the end of it all, if communication is the thing that nudges that behavior forward, that's a success in my book.
Right. Yeah. When you're working with teams as far as like projects are concerned and things like that, do you ever find the struggle of sort of like the constant measurement cadence versus, like we just want to hit our deadline and, maybe you can measure later kind of thing? Like, is any of that maybe a struggle for you as you kind of do your typical campaigning?
I'm probably the one who's guilty of it. Uh,
Yeah.
I think internal communications, there are definitely ways to measure. It's a
Mhm.
little hard sometimes to measure things like employee sentiment without just surveying back to back. And so a
Right.
lot of times I'm eager to just get the project out or drive the change or whatever the project needs. But definitely backing up, looking at, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? What are the KPIs? How will
Yep.
we measure that? You can't overlook it. From my experience and knowing that I'm often tempted to jump to execute and
Mhm.
learning that that's not always the best way to go about it, you
Yeah.
you you really don't wanna forget.
Yeah, it's just a struggle, right? Like there's so much bandwidth and everything's moving so quickly that it's like an important piece, but it's still just sort of a piece of the whole pie, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
let's switch over maybe to like the technology and AI side of things that we like to discuss. So the question I had was, how do you see AI shaping internal comms and knowledge sharing? Are we being realistic or is it a bit delusional right now?
Can I say both?
You can, yeah. That's often the answer that I've been hearing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna say that I don't use AI because I definitely do. It can accelerate a lot of the tactical parts of work. So, examples like summarizing data, formatting messaging, that's great, but it can't replace judgment, tone of voice. I mean, sort of, but it gets better over time, but you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're writing for. And as an internal communicator, you have to own that narrative still. Like we're not at the point yet. And as a writer, I know the pain of a blank page. Sometimes just getting the words down is the momentum you need, and that's where I use AI. It's great for structure, speed, but the power of comms truly lies in what you choose to say and what you don't. So AI does not know what I'm going to come in and cut out because I'm not going to say it. So I need to take that step. I need to complete those actions.
Right. Yeah. This is kind of the piece that I was thinking of before when you mentioned the conductor, because in reality, like it's an instrument in the orchestra to a certain extent, right? I'm wondering, like, are you the kind of person to do like a bunch of looking into AI, or are you kind of just using a certain set of tools for now just to kind of get yourself accustomed? The one thing that I'm always curious about is if people have already started to look into this concept of like the agents for the AI, for instance, or if you kind of consider the idea of like having different sort of AIs going out and doing parts of your role for you, if there were any parts that would be, like the ones that you'd love to get automated or simplified.
Yeah, good question. So I know that's something that I would love to look into more. I haven't gone that deep into the agent side. What I do think is that when I initially approached AI, I wasn't terribly impressed with the work that it gave me in response.
Yep.
And so it was easy for me to say, no, okay, I'm just going to do this work. It's not up to the level that I want it.
Mhm.
And every 6 months, I can less confidently say that. So
Yeah. Right.
uh, I I know that, I need to keep researching and keep going in and testing, like, pressure testing that, because eventually, it's possible that it will surpass the level of quality that I'm expecting or that I put out. And to a lot of people, that's super scary, and I get that, and I understand, that angle. But if you do use it as a tool, it's like your assistant, and that's how I view it. It's like, okay, what can I hand AI so that I can be freed up for other more impactful strategic work that AI still can't do or can't do to the level that I want it to.
Yeah, I guess this is there's sort of a follow-up question to this is like what makes a tool actually usable inside an organization? So for you, like just hearing what you were saying before about it didn't seem very good, right? Like there's sort of a quality component there, but like from other angles of that question, like can you think of anything else that sort of makes something usable or makes you want to kind of adopt it as part of your workflows? Like what do the vendors always seem to miss?
That's a very good question. And of course, I won't name names, but I've supported a handful of rollouts for tools myself. And I think, features are great. Features are super important. That's the flashy stuff that really buys us in on the demos. But what we often miss is the friction points. So, who's going to update this? Who owns it? Speaking to knowledge bases, you know, if somebody isn't constantly focused on updating it and keeping it current, that stuff falls into redundancy and then it collects dust. And then you're paying for a tool that nobody wants to use. Once that trust is lost or the friction points are too big a burden,
Yeah.
it's so hard to get the employees back in and using it.
Yeah, there really is like the level of effort to launch something versus relaunch something is different, right? And there's like a need to recognize that early on. From like I mean, what you just described to me is the topic of governance, and I bring it up a lot with the clients when I'm working with them. Do you find that there's any sort of like I don't know if best practice is the right way to put it, but if there's sort of like ways in which you've seen governance be more easy to achieve or to establish or to sort of confirm, or like, is there anything that you can think of there from the different tools that you've run out or rolled out?
Yeah, I will not say or claim that I'm an expert in governance
Yeah.
whatsoever. But I do think, from my experience, keeping the pool of admins smaller
Hmm.
helps reduce the opportunity for things to fall,
Right.
because you know that the three people responsible for this, it's much clearer who they are, what they're responsible for, if something gets dropped, who to go to. Instead, when you open it up to like 20 people, it's, I think, a little easier for someone to assume that a page will be updated or the tool will be audited because there are so many other people with their hands in the pot. So that's just my take.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with you. It's kind of one of those things where like if everybody's the owner, no one's the owner, which is a strange thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to kind of keep those things in mind. Nice. So maybe we'll switch over to another kind of angle for the conversation. If you could unlearn one best practice in your field, what would it be?
This one feels targeted at me right now because I'm going to go, I know it's not, I'm going to go with over polishing.
Mhm.
And I I cringe a little because it's something I definitely need to get over, but corporate comms really shouldn't feel like it's been through 10 rounds of legal review. And I've always been particular about syntax, word choice. I care a lot about the rules and the guardrails of language. And I mentioned I love structure and black and white. That's how I got into communications in the first place. I was raised this way. My
Mhm.
parents embedded this in me. But big but. Once you master all of that, you kind of have to forget it all. And don't tell my dad I'm saying this, but you got to bend the rules, rely on instincts, the nuance, just being human. Otherwise, you sound like a robot. And I'm learning that by being real and bending those rules, you will win more often. Being flexible versus perfect.
Yeah, there's definitely a need to be adaptive, whether we're talking about things like AI or if we're just talking about, reading the room, working with the different audiences. It's just part of being in that kind of role, right? As far as I always laugh thinking about this because it's like most of the people that I know who are working in internal comms have that kind of writer's background. And so it's things like, like how do you do your comma system and like how do you do your M dashes or do you use semicolons, like these are the things that we argue about behind closed doors. And it's just, you start to realize for a moment, like no one's paying attention to any of this, right? When you think about the ways of making things a little less official and polished, can you think of any examples recently? Like I like to think about how typically the best executive videos are the ones where you can get them being a little bit more authentic and silly. Like, do you do that kind of stuff over at Earnest?
Yeah, definitely. We have done, you know, we've done a ton of content with our CEO specifically, and he's a fun person. He's very unserious, very anti-corporate. So, no jargon and have fun, be yourself. And so that's really where I'm learning this lesson the most because I want to write the way that the, colleges have taught me to write. And
Yeah.
that's not how he talks. Like he's very smart. He talks really well. But my writing and his tone of voice are not the same. And so adapting my style to allow for that has been a lesson. And even just the way I start sentences with the word and isn't something that I used to do, but that's how he talks. So there's an example of just kind of breaking the rules a little bit to adapt.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, and you always want to make sure that it comes across as authentic. So yeah, you definitely don't want to make your CEO look more square, right? So
No, he
okay.
would hate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe let's switch gears a little bit for something fun. So finish this sentence for me. I know this is controversial, but
Kind of along the lines of tone, which I was just talking about. I'm going to say, I know this is controversial, but empathy is a strategy. It's not just a tone choice.
Mhm.
Final answer.
Yeah. Is this through observation or was this one of those like lessons learned or like where are you coming up with this from, you think?
Yeah, it's both. I kind of throwing back to one of my earlier answers about understanding how employees will feel when how they land, how messages land, and interpreting things through various lenses. I think you can't understate the power of empathy, even in times when you just think it's not the right idea or the right strategy, or let's just get the message out. And this isn't specific to Earnest necessarily, but I think, in the world we're in, empathy should never be forgotten, whether it's at the top of the list or, lower down, number 8 or 9, like, as long as it's on the list, let's make sure someone's considering it because it goes a lot further than people wanna believe it does.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I really love that you brought it up. I completely agree with you. And it's a really funny thing that again, the guests that I've had, for those of you in the audience listening to this, you probably have noticed like I've had several different communicators speak to this. And I think it's really, again, like it's a part of maybe the experience of going through and doing the work and just having to be so connected to the different audiences. But it always seems to be like an undercurrent that everybody's sort of thinking about and discussing. So it's very interesting that way. And I wonder, like, is it, from a cultural standpoint, like, do you think that this is a piece that you're getting out of the organization? Do you think that it's maybe more related to your role where it's sort of more of an emphasis or something to consider? I'm asking because it's kind of curious how you brought it up as a controversial statement, meaning that it's like people wouldn't necessarily believe it. Not to say that it's associated with Earnest, but I'm just sort of like, I'm curious, like maybe if you can give me a bit of context there.
Yeah, for sure. I follow a lot of C-suite executives on LinkedIn, for example.
Yep.
And I also did PR for a time and analyzed and reviewed a lot of executive content, press releases, statements made by heads of companies during tumultuous times. And I think often the pushback and the negative press was a result of lacking in empathy.
Mm.
So why? Why is it that the CEO of X company, not X, the company, that's an actual company. Let's go with Y company. It, you know, how many layers of review did that statement go through
Mm.
without someone calling out that maybe we're not being empathetic to the person reading this or the employee impacted by the behavior change in this statement? So, it's not new. We all know what empathy is. You learn it at such a young age. It's like first grade, right?
Mhm.
But still, we, experts, senior leaders, professionals are lacking this instinct to act with empathy. And I guess as an internal communicator, that's a big part of our job is to remind and make sure that it's considered.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Well, maybe we'll give you our last question. What's one principle or philosophy you try to live by in your work?
Great question. I am going to go with a quote from David Perel. Yes, David Perel is how you say his name. He's known as the writing guy, and he's got a great website called How to Write. Strongly recommend. And he says the world rewards the people who are best at communicating ideas, not the people with the best ideas. This resonates with me. And gosh, when I heard it the first time, it really resonated with me because I often don't think I have the very best ideas, but I do know how to listen, shape, and elevate the great people that I get to work with and their amazing ideas. And I've just found a lot of purpose in playing that behind the scenes role and shining the spotlight where it matters most.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, there is like absolutely this kind of like teacher mentality or, sort of like helping people guide their way through things, right? And I guess that really ties into the empathy side of things as well to a certain extent. So yeah, that's really good. Is that I can't recall, but is that the same writer? I don't know if you know this, but it's sort of like the idea of how to write a sentence. Is that the same person? Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not sure, but I know he does workshops and he's got a podcast, he's got a YouTube webinar, he has essays on his website that are so moving and profound, and you can learn so much in just a one-page essay on impactful writing. Again,
Mhm.
strongly recommend.
Yeah, that's great. I always like it when people kind of give other things to look into or learn from, right? So right on. Give them a shout out there. So let's say that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us. I do appreciate it, Penny. And hopefully maybe we'll be able to bring you back at some point in the future for maybe one of our panels or something like that to discuss one of these topics further.
Thanks, Jesse, for having me. It was an honor to be chosen to join you on this podcast.
Well, the honor's all ours. So thank you. And well, that's it for this episode of Unmuted. And if you liked what you heard, rate, review, and follow, and feel free to drop it in your team chat or exec update. It's the easiest win you'll have all week. And hey, if your organization's still on mute when it comes to comms and knowledge, Happio's here to help turn up the volume. Until next time, keep talking, keep listening, and whatever you do, stay unmuted.